Thank you all for coming. Um, for the people who haven't, there's a couple people who haven't been here before. So my name's Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of the Rising Artists Foundation. We are a 501c3 nonprofit uh, who we provide grants and holistic support for young musicians. And we are here in Pittsburgh for these 6 weeks doing the Fourth River program in collaboration with the Honcho crew. And so each Saturday for these 6 weeks, we're bringing a panel of professionals to come in and talk about different subjects that you as creatives will encounter in your careers. So, um, I guess I'll hand it over to you, the panelists, to introduce themselves.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Adam DeGonish, and I'm a business banking relationship manager for Citizens Bank. And so I spend most of my days talking with business owners, entrepreneurs, figuring out what challenges they're facing, figure out how, we can help. Really looking forward to, my goal for today would be y'all leave with a couple good tidbits of information that are going to be, help make your business more successful. That I'd consider that a win. So looking forward to it. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey folks, I'm AJ Ayers. I run a wealth management, tax, and financial planning firm called Brooklyn FI. So I am a certified financial planner. I file tax returns and all that jazz, but I used to be a music journalist. So before that, I worked at Bandcamp. How many of you have interacted with Bandcamp? Yeah, great company, right? So I sort of come from the creative world and am now in the finance world. So I hope that we can answer a lot of your questions today. I'm really looking forward to this.
So, I also want to thank our sponsors, Citizens Bank, the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, the Mac Miller Fund, Ableton, and Resident Advisor. So I also just want to say, that, just to kind of preface this, thank you all for coming to this one specifically. This one, a lot of people kind of have a little bit of resistance to sort of delving into the topic of financial literacy. It can be scary, it can be anxiety inducing. So thank you for coming. So we're going to try to keep this sort of high level and not into like specific like numbers per se, but just kind of talk about the concepts, talk about kind of how to position yourself. So we're going to start this off by kind of like framing just sort of the baselines of kind of how to orient yourself thinking about this. We're going to talk about like financial topics specific to artist careers, thinking about making plans for the future, and then we're gonna wrap up with some tactical questions, some tangible takeaways, things like that. So let's get started. So, okay, we want to frame it first since we have a Citizens Bank rep here. There's in the Pittsburgh airport. There's a Citizens Bank banner that says "Money can't buy you happiness, but understanding it can." So, one of the questions that we had collected earlier, this is sort of repeated among a few people, said sort of what's the baseline for being financially literate? Like, what do I need to know, and how do I need to kind of orient myself, just even approaching this topic? How do you guys address that with creatives and people that you work with?
Yeah, it's funny. So when I saw that, I remember this a long time ago, 20 years ago, I was working at a company and they offered a 401k for all their employees and they matched it dollar for dollar up to 6%. So for your retirement, you could put in money and they would literally, as much as you put in up to 6%, they would put in, doubling your money. And we found that not a lot of people were participating in it. So we kind of did a study to figure out, why is that the case? And initially kind of assumed maybe people just didn't have the money to save. And that actually wasn't it. When we did the analysis, it was people were just uncomfortable with a bunch of components of it. They didn't understand investing or investment options, even the ones that were in there. They didn't know what would happen if they left the company, and the lack of knowledge almost caused a paralysis to where, they then chose not to save for their retirement and take kind of the free money. 20 years later, I still remember that. That's bothered me, right? That, something that really just that, citizens that we all have to save for our retirement, right? We all should be able to do. And a lack of understanding really, prevented people, a lot of people from doing that. And I think so for everybody really should have just base level understanding of things. Like she's an expert, right? So she's grad student. But can everybody be a, right? Can we know, these are things I'm going to save for. These are my operating expenses. It's a saving for emergency. It's a saving to spend a down payment on something. And then this 12, right? 4 buckets of saving. Everybody kind of needs to know about them, regardless of where you are in putting money in those buckets. Credit cards are a great example. Can be used really effective to push out payables, to grab some rewards. The flip side is credit card interest is really, really high, right? So, accumulating credit card debt, probably, not a great idea. And if you do, priority is going to be to sort of pay down that debt. So, sort of having base level understandings of, hey, what are my levers to pull if things are tight? And what are my levers to pull, or where should I spend the money if maybe I have some extra? And just understanding that, because knowledge and understanding reduces stress. And so I think, anything I can do to help any of my clients or any of you folks, certainly looking, happy to do it. But base level understanding of base products to really reduce the stress and give you some semblance of a plan with what you're going to do with your money that maybe you don't even have yet, but it's sort of a plan moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's daunting. I think there's this assumption that we all have some baseline understanding of financial literacy, and I didn't. I got my first job out of college in book publishing, and I had carefully budgeted my rent. I had carefully budgeted my student loan payments. I had carefully budgeted how much I was going to spend on food. My salary was $28,000. This was a couple of years ago, and when I got my first paycheck, it was a lot less than I thought it was. I was like, what happened here? Did I get this wrong? Taxes had been taken out of my paycheck. Now, when I tell that story, people are like, you're an idiot. You didn't know about taxes? And my answer was, no, I didn't know about taxes. I went to good public schools in California. I went to a fancy liberal arts school. I studied literature, and not once had this idea about how taxes work. It didn't come up. So I called my dad, and he sort of explained, yes, there's federal withholding and state withholding. And I just felt so stupid in that moment. I couldn't believe that I had made this assumption. And I would love to tell you that that was the moment that everything changed, but no, it wasn't. It was another 15 years of working and sort of being clueless until I decided to really self-educate myself about how all this money stuff works. And unfortunately, I want to reward you and congratulate you for coming here today, because I'm sure there were other things that you could have done with your Saturday. So thank you for coming to talk about money. But really getting that knowledge of how the stock market works, how interest works in your favor and against you if we're in credit cards. All of those things are going to come in baby steps. And today is a great step. There are books to read. There are websites. There's Reddit. There are TV shows and podcasts. But really, it does take a commitment personally. And I do work with a lot of creatives in my financial planning and investment business. It does take a commitment to kind of accept that money is there. And if you are going to be a person who's going to participate in society, it is something that you need to use as a tool for your best life, not the other way around. And unfortunately, a lot of us find ourselves in positions where we sort of start out behind, right? We graduate school with student loans, or maybe we don't have people in our lives who can loan us money to pursue creative advents. Maybe the cost of living in the cities we want to live in or we need to live in to make our art have just gotten too high. So we're kind of starting from not a great place. So we actually have to try a bit harder, and we actually have to be smarter than generations were before us. So I just want to kind of come here and recognize that it's not easy. And we do hear a lot about, like, you got to learn this stuff. And my tough love is like, yeah, you do. You do have to learn this stuff. And it really depends on what kind of learner you are. I have clients who come in and say, I don't like reading long blog posts. Can you record a video for me? Sure, happy to do that. I can't sit through a YouTube video that's more than 30 seconds long, so I never want to see a video about anything. I'll listen to a podcast at 2 times speed if I want to learn about a new investment strategy or something like that. So pick your learning method and delve deep in it. And if there's something that does interest you specifically, follow that energy. For some of us, it's investing. For me, it's investing. For you, it might be investing. So whatever the thing is, find something that you care about and pursue that, because a lot of this stuff is boring. We're going to try to make it not boring today. But yeah, this is your first step.
So I think it might be helpful to just define some terms at the beginning. Uh, the the first ones that came to my mind are just a brief like who's who. I know AJ, you have like a ton of titles and accomplishments, so it's hard to even know what like who are the players in this space, and what do they do, and how can each of them be helpful to someone who's pursuing a creative career.
Yeah, I think so there's bankers who will help you open accounts. They can loan you money for things like businesses or mortgages for homes. There are accountants who can help you understand the cash flow and workings of your business. You might call them a CPA. I'm not a CPA, I'm an EA, which is basically a CPA who doesn't deal with companies, who deals with individuals. Um, then you have financial planners, financial advisors, which is not a regulated term. If you're going to work with a financial advisor, I'm biased. I'm a certified financial planner, a CFP. I recommend you find one of those who calls themselves a fiduciary, which means that they're going to put your interests ahead of their own. So they might recommend a bunch of different products to you because they think that's the best thing for you. So if I'm going to recommend a certain portfolio, it's going to be because I think that's the best one, not because someone's giving me a kickback to put you in that particular fund. Then we have lawyers. Let's not forget about lawyers. I imagine a lot of you deal in copyright. Having a good lawyer that you trust that is not terribly expensive is a really important person to have on your, I like to call them your money care team, your financial advisor, your accountant, your lawyer. Am I forgetting anybody? Lawyers, accountants, financial advisors.
Uh, I mean, the other thing I would add is like specifically from a musician's perspective, I feel like you'll encounter the term business manager a lot, and that's I feel like just tailored to musician career specifically. So, in my years as an artist manager, we would have a separate business manager who was handling the taxes, the investment. I guess it was like sort of a combination of some of those things.
Absolutely, and business managers are very unique, to music. There are also managers in other creative fields, and they sort of act as the middle person between you and the accountants, because musicians don't speak accountant and accountants do not speak musician, so you need someone in between, and a business manager can help you with all of that together, um, and they sort of act as like the hub of the wheel, and all the different spokes can go out to all these different professionals. And they can also help you find professionals. But honestly, my best advice to find someone is to ask people you trust in your community. Hey, does anyone have a really great accountant that is nice to them? And another bit of advice for accountants is do not reach out to them between February and April. They are stressed out. They are doing all their work from the entire year in this 6-week period, and they're going to be mean to you. They're not going to respond to your email. So reach out to accountants outside of tax season. That's when you're going to get great customer service and communication.
Okay, so sort of the overarching question that came in was about thinking about financial planning and thinking about finances from the perspective of an artist who's it's not a reliable, stable income. So a lot of the questions were, yeah, just around how do I set myself self up for financial stability in order to keep making my art. Um, so I guess what are some specific aspects of finances that like you talk to with people who don't have like a steady income from their craft, and how do you advise people when say 1 month they have 3 gigs of income coming in and there's 3 months of nothing, and how do they uh, sort of weather those peaks and valleys?
Yeah. I think, you know, once you sort of transition from doing art or making music because it's something that you love and you enjoy and convert that into something that now is now also a means to an end, right? Things change, like the way you look at things change. You're now solving a math problem, whether you want to be solving a math problem or not. And specifically with artists and musicians, the finances can be lumpy, like to his point, right? You might have a month where you have, a bunch of gigs and then a month where you don't have anything. But in the meantime, your bills don't stop, right? You still have mortgage or rent to pay. You still have to feed yourself. Kids don't stop being expensive if you have any children, right? So, if, if you're not, let's say, working another job and you're full on musician, somehow, some way, right, you either have to pay yourself, so money's got to come in, or then it's going out. And cash solves, like, money gives you time, right? So the more money you have saved, the more time you have to not make money, right? Because you can sort of use that. And so the best thing to do is, when things are good, save, right? You really want to be diligent about knowing what your expense lines are, both personally and on the business. And in the good months, make sure you have some saved, so that on the lean months, you have money to spend on the things that don't go away. Easier said than done. Life is hard, and running a business is probably harder. But like I said, it's a math problem, right? And so be diligent on your expenses. Make sure that if it's something that you're paying for, that it's something that you need to be paying for. And, plan appropriately. You want to have some line of sight into revenue. So maybe different revenue streams, right? So playing a gig that requires real time. Is there any recurring revenue that you can earn, ready maybe from sort of pay for clicks or licensing something? Right? Is there anything that you can do that can get some money coming in? I know years ago I worked with a photographer, and his passion was photographing dance. So still photographer, and dance was his passion. So he had some relationships with some local dance studios. So when they had shows or they needed to connect them, he would go in and take pictures. But that didn't fully support him. And so, he broke into other things, right? He was doing weddings, things like that you kind of would associate with photography to make additional money. And he actually, I forget the name of the website, but he took basically stock photos, like keywords, like he would think beach, sunset, golden retriever, family, things like that. And so in his free time, he would go take these pictures that would kind of suit those kinds of things. And then people would sort of upload them to this site. And then the site was used by marketers and things like that who needed stock photos. And then he got paid anytime sort of somebody used one of his photos. Something I would have not thought of in that space to make money, but he was really thinking sort of outside the box a little bit, right? Hey, what are some things I can do to leverage my talent to make money? Because again, the goal is to live. When you work to live. And so maybe thinking about some other ways that you can make revenue to do what you can to maybe smooth some of that out. You might find something.
Yeah, we call it lumpy income in my business. You use the word lumpy too. Yeah, I think one of the most important things, and you touched on this, is knowing how expensive you are. How much does it cost to live your life at a baseline? What's your rent? What's your basic food? Do you have car payments? Do you have loans? Are you supporting other members of your family? For those of us in our 30s and 40s, we're potentially in this sandwich generation where our parents are getting older and we're maybe taking care of them, and we're having kids and thinking about supporting the next generation. Oh, we're trying to handle ourselves. So we have that a lot on our plates. So how expensive are you? What does it cost you to live your life for 1 month? And really look at the numbers. Don't just guess. Figure out how much money is leaving your account each month. We call this an emergency fund. It's a pile of savings. I typically recommend that artists and folks who do not have a steady paycheck coming in every 2 weeks have at least 6 months of living expenses saved. So what does it cost you to live for 1 month? Multiply that by 6. That is your target to have in a bank, in an account that you don't touch until you hit an emergency. Now, an emergency could be lots of things. For some of us, it's a dry month of income. It's a family member gets sick. You get sick. Your car breaks down. Your water heater explodes. There's lots of fun things that happen in life that would cause us to tap that emergency fund. But I do think in order to survive those periods of, famine, really, when it comes to income, you have to have that safety net. So I like to think about basic personal finance and a basic understanding as an order of operations. So, number one thing, the first thing you do when you're looking at your money and you're going, oh my God, this is a mess. What am I going to do? Do you have high interest credit card debt? If you have that, let's get rid of it. That's expensive. Let's wipe that out. And the second item is this emergency fund. So for those of us that don't have that steady flow of income coming in, 6 months at a minimum. I would love for you to have a whole year. So as you're doing your savings, as you mentioned, if you do have a big paycheck come in or a big royalty check, that's a great opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to live a little bit below where I was last month, and I'm going to save as much of that as I possibly can into this emergency fund. You will feel so much better knowing that you have that little pile of cash when the hard times hit.
And I'd like to echo that, because I talked about how sort of money buys you time. When you start out your own business, paying yourself is going to be your basic expense. In the future, that probably won't be true. But right when you start, maybe you have a couple $100s a month for some software licensing fees to make music. Maybe you're paying somebody, a side gig to help you out with your social media marketing. So there'll be some little stuff there, but your business expenses early on really shouldn't be high, are going to be a lot higher. And so, to her point, if you have that money sitting there in an emergency fund on the personal side, your business, you're going to give yourself a lot more time to figure it out, to learn, to make mistakes, to figure out how to make a profit, when all you have to pay is those operational expenses for the business, which are pretty minimal, as opposed to needing to pay yourself as well, which is considerably more expensive. In that example there, you just bought a year, right? It's a year that all you have to do is make a couple $100s a month to pay those expenses, and not a couple $1,000s a month to pay yourself as well.
Yeah, so this is another question that came in. So, okay, that idea of like, okay, I need 6 months of my living expenses just there as an emergency fund. What other questions, like, what other questions should I, as a young musician, be asking to get helpful answers like that? Like, what comes across your desk? What do people come in confused about, or some people don't know what they don't know, right?
I mean, the biggest question I get is about student loans. And it's, I have them. Do I pay them off? Should I refinance them? And unfortunately, there isn't a great answer to that. But it is one of those conundrums that you just kind of like put it aside, right? If it's not keeping you up at night, just kind of forget about it and move forward. There's this idea in there's kind of like these platitudes in personal finance. The number one I would say is spend less than you make. That's obvious, right? Let's spend less money than you make so we can live and survive and maybe save a little bit for our future retirement. The other one is save 20% of your income. I would love for all of us to be saving at least 20% of our income. There was a period in my life where I was saving 50% of my income. That lasted about a year. Now I'm saving about 5% because I'm building a business and everything's going right back into the business. So the questions you need to be thinking about are, where is the best place for a dollar to go? And that's why I like this idea of this savings order of operations, which is, okay, I have a dollar. I've got $5,000 of credit card debt at 28% because I opened a Amex travel card because I thought I was going to get a free trip to Paris. And now I've got this expensive debt. That's the best place for that dollar to go. Okay, great. I paid off all my credit card debt. Now I'm going to start saving towards my emergency fund. Great. In a year, I've got my 6 months of living expenses. Awesome. Where should the next dollar go? That's what goes into savings. And I really think about that as long-term savings. And I'm sure we'll talk about this. And by that, I mean retirement. I mean 401ks. I mean IRAs, all these stupid acronyms that the IRS made up that are so uncreative. So start asking those questions. Ask your friends, ask your parents, ask your accountant or your financial advisor if you have one. Where can I optimize what I have? Whether you have $300 of income or $300,000 of income. That's really kind of the personal aspect of finance, is that everyone's different. I can sit up here and give you answers, but I don't know what's going on in each of your situations. So, hey, here's what I have. What is the best place for that next dollar to go? That's my favorite question.
Cool. And so thinking about like that dollar coming in, a lot of people here have multiple revenue streams, right? So some people have a day job. Musicians will sell their records on Bandcamp. They'll play some shows. They'll sell some T-shirts. When you're thinking about when you're thinking about money coming in versus money going out, what's your advice on how to kind of like look at that in a more nuanced way of these different aspects of your income?
Yeah, it's hard, right? You have income coming in from all different places. Some of it's regular, some of it's irregular. This is where you kind of just have to confront all of it. I have a Substack post called Learn Excel or Die, which is obviously me exaggerating, but there is this idea that you are the business owner, right? If you're a DJ, you are the CFO, the CEO, the CMO. You are doing all of these things in your business. And unfortunately, the CFO part of it usually gets missed. But my best advice to you when you have all these different streams is to really look at all of them at least monthly, which I know is a lot, and just say like, hey, I've got, and start to notice trends, right? Hey, I'm selling a lot of records in March for whatever reason, and my income goes up. Then you can start to understand what your total income is for the year, and that can help you plan better for those months of famine. So I mean, at its basic level, Excel spreadsheet of what's coming in, all the different streams by month. And then if you start doing that, you'll have that data over years to really understand, hey, is this a viable business? Is my income trending upwards? And if it's not, maybe it's time to rethink, or maybe it's time to, not quit your day job. I hate day job, by the way. I don't like that term. Most people have different revenue streams. Most creative people do different things. So there is no shame. In fact, I think it's quite empowering to have an income stream that is not necessarily related to the creative thing you want to be spending 100% of your time on. It is perfectly okay to be a paralegal or a barista or prepare taxes, in my case, to fund the project that you want to be spending time on. They're just simply the economics of all artists making a living wage from doing their art 100% of the time don't exist. So we have to fill in the gaps to, be able to live our lives. Sorry, that was preachy, but that's how I feel.
And, I think, talked a little bit there about clarity, right? Being able to see and know and use an example of an Excel sheet. Probably, especially, we're dealing with a bunch of new entrepreneurs. It's probably a good idea for the same reason, to open a business bank account, so that you can separate it from your personal stuff and very clearly see what's happening. So just as an example, well, let's pretend that you have a really good month. Bunch of stuff's booked, some sold, bunch of stuff sold. Let's say you normally have $4,000 going out for the business to pay for yourself, plus some expenses. And you're looking in your business checking account now, and you made $8,000, so there's an extra $4,000 in it. Have a decision to make. Do I want to keep this in the business so I have it there for future business expenses? I have a vacation coming up personally. Do I want some of this to exit to maybe handle some things on the personal side? The point is you can very clearly see what you have, what's in there, and then make whatever decisions that you need to make. If you take that same example, but all of that money is in a personal checking account where you may have other sources of income that aren't related to the business coming in there. You may have a significant other and it's a joint checking account and their income is coming in there. You've got your personal expenses there that aren't business expenses. How do you even make that same decision appropriately? Because you lose the clarity and the insight into what's actually happening. So definitely something that you want on your radar, probably sooner, more so than later, if you're starting this as a business, is to get that business account set up.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if you don't want to use an Excel spreadsheet, your bank account is basically your income and expenses, but you have to be very diligent about making sure that everything is going through that one account. The biggest mistake we see, self-employed folks make is, blending all the personal and business expenses. People think they're being smart by like writing off every dinner, but if you do that, you have no idea if you have a viable business, and you actually end up paying more taxes because everything's all mixed together. And at the end of the year, you have to go back and figure out like, what was that breakfast I had in February? Was that a business expense or not? So having that separation from day one is really, really smart. And I'm sure you can talk about how to open a business account, but it's very easy. The first step is just to get an EIN. How many of you have EINs for your business? Yeah. It's just a social security number for your business. They're free. It takes about 2 minutes to open one with the IRS. Once you get that, you take it to the bank, you open an account, and you're good to go.
So once you have the EIN number and you have the business account for this type of work, how do you make the business plan? Like, do you have any advice for just even how to like start that process and start to? I mean, I guess obviously money coming in, money going out, but any more anything beyond that?
Yeah, business plans are hard because I think they were invented by the MBA industrial complex, which is like every business needs to have a plan to start. You need to have some kind of plan. I like goals. I like setting annual goals and then breaking them up into quarters. And that could be as simple as this year, I want to make $30,000. I want to put out one record. I want to play 15 shows. I want to get 3 syncs. I want to sign a manager, and I want to save $2,000 into my IRA. That's you start at the beginning of the year, and then you break it up. And each quarter, you're going to say, these are the steps I'm going to take for these goals that I've outlined. And at the end of the quarter, you're going to review, did I get all of those done? And you basically set up small steps for you to check off the box so you're making progress towards these goals. If you set a business plan that's like, I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to become a million record selling artist this year, like that's not realistic and that's not a plan, right? What are the things that are going to make you happy? And what are the milestones that you can realistically accomplish? Has anyone heard of SMART goals before? What is it? It's simple, measurable, uh, achievable, time bound, whatever. Anyway, you know, are these actual realistic goals that you can hit? And do they have clear next steps to achieve them? So my version of business plan is pick 5 things you want to accomplish this year, and then each quarter do the one thing that you're going to do for each of those 5 goals.
And that can really easily be tied into any creative plan anyways of like, okay, by the end of the year, I want to have this EP finished. Let's tie the creative in with the financial to kind of have a holistic plan where I want to be by the end of the year.
Yeah, and budgets are so important, right? Because if you want to record a record, yeah, maybe you want to get a record deal and maybe they're going to give you an advance to help you record that. But what if that doesn't happen? You still want to make the record. You're going to make this record whether someone else is paying for it or you're paying for it. And if you're going to pay for it, you have to know what the limit is. And unfortunately, we see a lot of folks say, there's no budget. This is the most important thing to me. And I want that to be true for you, but unfortunately, that could potentially set you back. And then the next record, and then the next thing you want to do in your career, you're stuck because you've got credit card debt or a loan you can't pay back.
And the other thing is right when you start, you're basically guessing, right? Data, you generally make good decisions off of data, and there's no data. So you're forecasting, you're guessing, maybe talking to people who are in the same scenario and trying to get an idea. But as you move forward, you really want to start to build out the best data sets that you can with regards to things so that you can forecast better and make better decisions. So you mentioned merch, right? So this is a big one. So let's say you're doing shows and you're going to sell some t-shirts that you have printed up. How many do you print? Because every one you make costs you money, right? So how many people are at the show? You don't know. So you're going to guess. But every show that you do, log, well, how many people were at the show and how many shirts did I sell? After you've done that 10 times, you'll start to have an idea. I don't know what the number is, I'm guessing, but okay, so 10% of the people there buy a shirt or 30% buy a shirt or whatever. So now, as you move forward, whenever you're trying to plan out, well, I know I have a show, I know it's going to bring in this much, and I know this is how much I'm going to spend on the shirts, and this is how much I'm going to make on those shirts. So your forecasting becomes more accurate. You waste less money, right? Because now you know how many shirts to print. You're not maybe printing far more extra. So you're gaining efficiencies for the business. You're getting a better idea to forecast so that what might have been sort of difficult to do some planning gets a little bit better as you move forward, as long as you're really diligent about trying to make sure you track those things and figure it out so that you can use it. It's probably not an innate thing to do, but again, you're running a business now. This is definitely something you want to start thinking about.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, how do I know how much to invest in each aspect of my creative career? So merch and recording the EP and whatever. So I think that's ties in really, really strongly here of, okay, every single thing I'm doing, I'm keeping a record of in an Excel spreadsheet or, whatever way you have to keep, even if it's just like the banking, the business banking or whatever. But so as you build up this data of, Bandcamp sales, t-shirt sales, a few shows here and there, then how do you take that data and how do you decide like what chunk of that can be invested back into that area of your career?
That's a very hard question because unfortunately the answer is probably going to be, hey, I've noticed that this thing I don't like doing actually ends up being the most lucrative. You used the example of the photographer. I don't like shooting weddings. They hurt my feet, and brides and grooms are nightmares. Like, I don't want to do this. But hey, I noticed that my income spikes when I do those things. Whereas the thing I love to do the most is play shows. Playing shows are great if the economics work, but sometimes they don't. Going on tour is expensive. So when you start to have this data, you can start to see these trends and see that, hey, this one thing that I don't like doing, unfortunately, I actually might have to invest a little bit more time and money into doing that thing so I can stabilize my income a little bit more. Um, the crux of all this is kind of a catch-22, right? It's like, I want to do my creative thing, but my creative thing might not pay for the lifestyle that I want. So again, I just want to come back to this idea that it is okay for the most creative, most fulfilling parts of your life to not necessarily generate income. But that said, you have to have this underlying base, whether it's a emergency fund or help from grants or family or spouses or what have you. And if you don't have one of those things, then it's really you need to have a steady stream of income. And that's that day job that I hate. And that stream can be, I'm sure some of you have experienced, you get one sync, or you get one song that pays for the rest of it. I'm sure you talked to the labels folks last weekend. Most record labels have one or two hits that finance everybody else. Book publishing works the same way. So you kind of have to find that one thing that's going to be that steady source of support, financial support for you to do the things that you want to be spending your time on.
How do you determine when you're financially safe to quit the day job?
Don't quit your day job.
I think from the business aspect, if you look, it's actually pretty easy. So, right, it's when you're in the black. So whenever the money coming in consistent over a period of time, so it's not just a blip, is handling the business operational expenses as well as paying yourself what you need to live, that's when you're good.
Over how much time? To know that it's not a blip.
Right. So that will vary based on your own almost personal risk tolerance, right? Like if you've done it for 2 years, I'm be more confident that it will remain that way than if you've done it for 3 months. Where you fall in on that, really, that's really up to you. But the longer you've been able to maintain it, probably the less risk it is at that point to quit the quote unquote day job.
Yeah, and I think from a simple calculation standpoint, is the money coming in from the creative work you want to do? Is it covering your personal and business expenses? And also, are you able to save at least 20% of that into these long-term future accounts, our 401ks or IRAs? If that's the case, yeah, you have that opportunity to take a risk, right? When you have nothing saved and you have no baseline, it's very risky to lose that steady income. But if you have a nice cushion to fall back on, there's less risk. So you can, quit the day job, try it for 6 months. If it doesn't work, you've spent through your savings. Okay, now I'm back at zero, but at least I'm not in the red. And then I can go back to that day job and start that cycle all over again.
And I think that it's funny. So we're both money people, right? But there's probably an answer to this question that's it's not money related completely. So I think a lot of it depends is on the day job too. Is it something that you generally enjoy doing? Maybe like you don't hate it, and you're happy with kind of the work that you do every day, or is it like some soul sucking thing that's making you miserable, right? Because depending on the answer to that question, one might keep you there, whereas one might have you jetting.
Um, so a few people asked about loans, right? And as a means to invest in your creative craft and your creative career. Uh, how do you think about loans? Also, one thing to reiterate, if you're talking to record labels, like like we did last week, an advance that you would get from a record label is a loan. It's not a check. It's not a paycheck. But so how do you think about how do you advise people to say, oh, I want to, you know, kickstart a touring career. I need to buy, some backline, some gear, whatever. Should I take a loan out to do that?
I'll handle that one. I'm the loan guy. So it's interesting. So as a banker for citizens, so citizens and banks in general, you're FDIC insured institutions. They're generally more conservative on the lending. So for instance, at Citizens, for sort of an artist or musician, our time and business requirements would be, say, 6 months for a credit card, and then 3 years for something like an installment loan or a working line of credit, which obviously, if you're just starting, right, is not going to work for 'em. I don't speak for all banks. However, it's, kind of the way it works in general, unless you find some exceptions. So if you're looking for sort of entry level startup kind of funding, you're usually looking at like third party lending. There's a company here in Pittsburgh called the Progress Fund that can do small, they call them micro loans, for somebody with some credit score requirements. I don't know what they are in a certified business plan. So you're out sort of chasing the funding. And if it works for you, great. Your terms generally aren't as good as after you've been in business for a couple of years. But if it's giving you the money you need to start your dream, they're sort of, it's an excellent use for it, right? That's why they exist. And then sort of where it would sort of get sort of to me, or how Citizens would really kind of help is sort of when you take it to the next step. So you've been in business a couple of years now. You're making some money and you have some ideas of some strategic investments that you can make to really grow it even further. At that point, probably gonna is whether you look to the bank for help. Is what we're really good at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that your example of getting a loan to buy equipment or something to finance a tour, like, you have to look closely and say, like, is this tour actually going to, I don't like to use the word guarantee, but am I actually going to make this, like, can I pay back this loan in 3 to 6 months or whatever the term is? And if the answer is no, don't take the loan out, because what's going to happen is you're going to default on that loan. And then it starts to create this domino effect of falling into the red in your financial situation. And it's harder to come back from that. Uh, there are lots of creative ways to, get capital to do things. There's also cheaper ways to do things. We have crowdfunding, we have grants, we have, please avoid credit cards at all costs. I love credit card points. I think I said this earlier, but I have seen in my work so many lives, I don't want to say ruined, but a lot of stress, because credit cards are easy, right? You can get approved with one in college, no problem, right? And it just sets you up on this, you're on your back foot and you're always going to be fighting to get ahead. So please avoid credit cards at all costs, to fund things that you are not 100% positive you can pay back in a short period of time.
Just to echo on the credit cards, I tell all of my clients, view it as a payables solution, not a lending solution. So credit cards are really, really good for businesses to push back your payables a little bit, right? Instead of paying it today, you put it on the credit card and you pay it a month from now, right? So that increases cash flow. Most credit cards out there have some rewards. You're going to get, 1.5% or something cash back. That's good. And they keep your checking account safe, as opposed to like using a debit card, right? Where if that's compromised, now they have access to your checking funds. Whole lot easier to deal with a compromised credit card and less pop. Really, really good for that. But interest rates are high. And so it's not something you want to, there are things you want to be, life is hard, right? Do the best you can, but you want to pay them in full every month. And if you do have some credit card debt, after, putting food on your table and paying your rent, throwing it at the credit card is probably the highest priority that you have.
All right, so we have a few like very tactical questions here. So, what bank accounts or what bank account is right for this, this business bank account, and what do I need to open it?
Yeah. So, you know, it's all kinds of ways to start a business, right? And for the sake of these purposes here, we're assuming that folks are starting with the blood, sweat, tears, and whatever money they can cobble together, right? And at Citizens, I mean, we have a clearly better business checking, no minimum balance, no monthly service fee, allows you to write 200 checks a month, which you're not going to be writing. And so, whether you choose Citizens or somewhere else, you want, so they're inexpensive checking. Most banks have a version of them. And, we'd love to have you. But really, this is about you, not us. So as long as you're opening it up somewhere, that'll be used with you. We do have, Citizens they always have promos going on, like right now through the end of the month. By the way, show of hands, like, is anybody at the stage where you'd be like ready to open a business account, or are we a little bit early here? This is kind of still trying to figure that out. Sure. Okay. So some of you already have one. Yeah. So, I mean, we have a promotion right now. It's through the end of October, that you can earn an extra $300 if you open it. And there's asterisks, something like that. I have a marketing flyer I can hand out if anybody wants. But it's a $300 bonus if you kind of can open with and maintain an average of $5,000 over a couple months. And then it scales up from there in terms of bonus. So we always have something going on. Free checking account, no minimum balance, no monthly service fee. That's what I would look for if I was you and trying to sort of shop for a bank, the product itself. And then whenever you go in to talk to somebody or to open it, like trust your gut. Like, is this somebody that I want to work with? Because we stay connected with our business clients. We tend to talk to them, on a quarterly basis, if not more. You get a person assigned to you, so you know the name of a person, email them, as opposed to sort of calling 800 number. So that's the two things I would look for: is the account itself, and make sure that it's inexpensive. And then, do you feel good about the person that you talk to who's opening up with you and you're going to be working with?
Yeah, also something that we went through as a business, and I'm sure all of you did too, was COVID. When COVID happened, there was a very quick government policy turnaround, which was, we're going to give out these PPP loans. We're going to give out these small business loans to folks. And the people, my clients at the time who got the loans, were those who had business bank accounts and who had bankers who were working with them who could actually get these done. And unfortunately, what happened is a lot of our clients had kind of opted out of the banking system entirely and then didn't get to benefit from this free money that came in. So, in April of 2020, my business partner and I were working 80-hour weeks trying to get these loans done. We were working really closely with bankers, and the folks that actually got the money were the ones who just had the accounts open, and had them open for a long enough time. So, there is this, I think there's this untrustworthiness, I'm going to say our generation, I think we're all roughly the same age, of the financial institutions, because they've wronged us in the past, and they wronged our parents, and they wronged our grandparents. But participating in the system does not make you a bad person. There are, banks exist for a reason, to protect people. There are federal laws in place. You mentioned FDIC earlier. FDIC, basically, the federal government ensures that if the bank fails or someone steals your money from your checking account, they will make you whole up to $250,000. So that's a pretty safe place to put your money. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of alternative banking systems pop up, like cryptocurrency. If someone steals your crypto, that's it. It's gone. Sorry. I could tell you lots of horror stories after this panel if you like. So having a business bank account legitimizes your business. It changes the way you think about the money that's going in.
All right, so we're going to move into questions in a second, but one thing that we haven't touched on yet is how to think about taxes and withholding some of your money for taxes as an independent contractor. What is your advice for how to do that?
How many of you have ever had a surprise tax bill? Yeah, every year, right? So my specialty is, people come to me and they go, I fired my accountant last year because I owed money. It was not your accountant's fault. It was your fault because you made money. Sorry. Taxes exist. If you feel bad about paying taxes, break your arm and call an ambulance. That's what most of your tax dollars are going towards. They are a necessary part of society, so just get over it. You owe them. That's my tough love. My real advice is, I'm sorry, we're in Pennsylvania, right? Okay, sorry. My New York brain, I'm like, save 50%. No, if you're not in New York City, 30% of any dollar that comes in for any money that you make, that isn't going on a paycheck, that isn't going through an employer, 30% of that needs to get saved in a separate bank account called taxes. That could be a business bank account, it could be a savings account. I don't care. It just needs to be separate. And the reason for that is because I hope that will be able to cover your tax expense at the end of the year. And if it doesn't, the amount that you owe will not be terrifying. I have lots of stories. One that sticks out, a client of mine was a ceramicist for years, made a couple $100 here, a couple $1,000 there, ended up getting a huge contract with, I think it was anthropology, $300,000 contract. Huge money, crazy, so exciting. We did this whole financial plan. disappeared, as a lot of creatives often do when they start working with accountants, disappears, comes back and says, I got this $100,000 tax bill. What happened? It's like, well, you didn't pay tax. You didn't save any of this money for taxes. So this idea that you get excited about something big that comes in, the first thing I want you to do whenever you see money is that you save 30% of it. How many of you pay quarterly taxes? Quarterly estimates? Yeah, pay them. I'd love for you to do that. But honestly, and don't quote me on this, I know this is recorded, but the penalties are not crazy enough for you to stress out about quarterly taxes. If you're already paying them, please don't stop. If they make you very stressed out, it's okay. As long as you're saving that money somewhere in a bank account, maybe it's a high interest account that's paying you a little bit, it's okay to save that and just pay it once at the end of the year. The penalty right now, I think, is like 6 or 7%. It could be a rounding error depending on how much you owe. So save 30%. We didn't really talk about retirement accounts. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that. Okay. So one of the best ways to actually reduce the amount of tax that you owe, there's no like secret magic that your accountant can do. But if you do make a contribution to a 401k or a SEP IRA, anyone have a SEP IRA? Yeah. Love SEP IRAs, by the way. You actually get to reduce the amount of income that gets taxed. So if you are achieving my goal of 20% savings rate, if you're putting all that into a SEP IRA, you are actually going to pay less taxes than your friend over here who made the exact same amount of money. So saving for retirement in this country, you are rewarded by getting a little break on your taxes if you're saving for your future. So love SEP IRAs. They're very easy to open. Do you have them at Citizens? Can you open? Yeah. It's a lot easier to do than people think. Your accountant, your financial advisor can help you as well.
And since we're talking about taxes as well, I will sort of talk to your accountant early. Like even when you're just getting started, talk to an accountant, say, here's the plan, here's what I'm doing. Can I have some piece of advice? Because you could just hand them statements for a year's worth and they'll kind of do some math for you. But there's behavioral things that you can do or things to maybe that you should record that you wouldn't think of, because a lot of taxes is not particularly intuitive. Some of it is you would just never know unless you were in that space. And so, it's not just where they're going to run some math off of your bank statements and pop out a number. Like maybe you can be recording, mileage for certain things. Maybe you can be writing off a percentage of your home office compared to what you're paying rent. So there's all kinds of things you can do that you want to be doing real time that you'll have missed if you just like wait until this, February and hand them a year's worth of statements. So find somebody that you trust. It's a really important relationship as a business owner. And talk with them early. Don't wait until it's tax time. So you can kind of get a game plan and think of some things maybe that you wouldn't have thought on your own.
All right, cool. So we'll open up to some questions. So
My first question is, what is a SEP IRA if I were looking for
Great
it?
question. It is a self-employed pension. And basically, if you have any income that you've earned that didn't go through an employer, it's called a W-2, meaning it didn't go through a paycheck, it didn't have tax already withheld, you can open this special retirement account and you can contribute up to, it's roughly 20% of whatever income you earn. So let's say you earn $10,000 in a year. You could contribute $2,000. You put it in this SEP IRA account. That's just the name of the account. We have IRAs, we have regular brokerage accounts, we have 401ks. The SEP IRA is only available to business owners. And then that money gets invested. So you can buy stocks and bonds and funds within that. And then it's protected from taxes forever, which is really awesome. So as that account grows, as the stock market continues to go up and to the right, which it has for 120 years, you don't have to pay taxes annually on that. In retirement, you might have to pull it out and pay a little bit of tax, but we're playing this game where right now I'm adding to the pile, so I'm probably paying a lot of tax, whereas in retirement, my tax rate's probably going to be a little bit lower. So SEP IRA is a long-term retirement savings vehicle for artists and self-employed people.
Cool. So start with an EIN, open up a business account, then open up the SEP IRA with that.
Yes.
Great.
Skipped a few steps, but yeah, basically.
EIN first for sure, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's your ticket into opening up a business account, basically. And it separates we didn't really touch on LLCs that much, but it sort of separates your personal from your business, which is really important from just a emotional standpoint, right? To know that this is the place where I make money and this is the place where I spend money.
Just add to that because you mentioned LLC, which is probably one of the more common structures we see in a lot of new businesses. If you're going to do that, because we talked about the EIN, LLC first, then EIN. You want to have the LLC filed, have the correct name. So if you're doing that, LLC first, then the EIN.
Questions? Yes. Yeah.
Thanks so much, y'all. I have some questions regarding business investments outside of like retirement accounts. Are there any I have had some short-term investments as an individual, but because we have received some awards in recent years, I've mostly just let business funds that were kind of income go unused. And I'm curious about business CDs or short-term investments and anything like any like basic like don't do this or like maybe you should think about this sort of tips.
What do you mean by short-term business? You mean like
I received an artist award, and so there's like some excess income that's just sitting in a bank account doing nothing. And I'm curious about CDs or short-term investments for the business that are like separate from like an individual short-term investment. Yeah.
So, question for you, so I want to make sure I understand. So, is the money was awarded to your business,
Yes.
and then is it currently in a business bank?
Yes.
And so then the question is, what can I do with that at the bank to kind of
Now,
get a better rate of return?
could that potentially accrue interest?
So you would money market account or a CD, right? So there are money market accounts, which the sort of the rates on those can change depending on the market. Banks might change them monthly or every 3 months or 6 months. So obviously when rates are high, they'll pay more. When rates are lesser, they'll pay lesser. And that's a good place to park it, also to get it out of your checking account so it doesn't get confused. Keeps it fully liquid at any given time, right? If you change your mind or you want to deploy it somewhere else, just get it right out. And then there would be a CD would kind of be the other option if we're talking about sort of your fixed banking products. The difference there is the bank is locked into the rate just like you are. So, CDs are pretty popular when people think rates are going to be coming down because unlike the money market account where we can drop the rate, if we give you a 9-month CD at 4%, for 9 months, it's going to be 4%. Rates could drop to 0, you're still getting your 4, right? And so the downside of that one is a little less liquid, right? You'd really, in some exceptions or penalty or something like that, you generally won't have access to those funds until 9 months, in which case then you would do it again. So depending on what your specific needs are, those are the two kind of things that I would look at and ask the bank about.
I think if you are going to spend that money within the business, you should do that. If you don't need to spend the money within the business and you're not a partnership or you're not a C corporation, you can just take that money out for yourself.
I just want to make sure I'm not doing anything illegal on accident.
Is the truth of all this is really hard to do something truly illegal unless you're intentionally defrauding the government. The worst thing that happens is you owe a little bit of penalties. And in all of my years of preparing hundreds of tax returns, I have only seen one person intentionally try to defraud the government.
Another thing that I would look at, especially once money's in your business, is there a investment in if you can invest that in your business and make 20 to 30% return based on what you decided to do with it, that's a heck of a lot better than 4% in a CD or money market account. So, you guys are using your time to make money, but you can also use can you hire somebody? Is there something you invest in that will give you a return that's higher than that? That's the other thing I would look up once you have that excess money there, is aside from the fixed banking products, is there a way that you can use that to make your business more profitable?
Thank you.
And you?
Hi. Is there a difference between the money market account and a high yield savings account for business?
Not really. So generally speaking, when you look at the banking products, usually savings accounts might be a little lower. in terms of rates than the money market accounts. But really, the differences between the two, they're back end things as a customer. The use case for the products, but savings account or money market are basically the same.
More questions? Oh, all the way in the back.
I had a quick question. I am sometimes just trying to figure out like where to look for, say, comparisons. And one site that I've come across is NerdWallet. Is that a legitimate site? Is that something that's also trying to push certain, I mean, I think they do have comparisons that are like legitimate, but just as a resource, is it better to, is that something that's reliable? Are there other resources like that that are, if that's not the case, that are,
That is a great question. So NerdWallet, I believe, is owned by Intuit, which is the large corporation that makes all of the tax software that you use, that I use, that we all use, that constantly lobbies our friends to keep taxes complicated. Anyway, it used to be an independently run journalism site. I don't mind NerdWallet. I think there's good content on there. I will look up rates on there. Sometimes it's just a feed. Bankrate.com is also a place for comparison if you're just wanting to compare, different savings accounts rates. Consumer reports. There's one for banks, and you can actually read reviews. I don't know if you trust Yelp for restaurant recommendations. I don't know if you would trust other people's reviews for banks, but NerdWallet's totally fine. And I think part of finance is understanding who is giving you advice, and what are their incentives. If NerdWallet's incentives are to get the click to send you to a bank, okay, that's fine. You know that, but they're just giving you the rates, so that's okay. Let's give them the click. Whereas if you're landing on a site that you thought was a financial planner and they're recommending an insurance policy to you, like, really try to understand what their incentives are and how they get paid, right?
And then I'll also add there, I would always call a couple banks as well, only because there's a lot of times banks have promotions and things for deposits that they just don't make the data scrapes for those sites. Maybe they're not be publicly listed in the way that those things pull them. So it is possible that if that's all you're looking at, that you might miss a good deal somewhere. So it's a good starting point, I think, but I would always recommend to walk into a branch or give a call to a couple places because you might get something that those sites didn't catch.
Yeah, and another thing is a lot of folks will chase like the highest interest rate for like high yield savings accounts. So there'll be like a promotional rate. Hey, we're gonna pay 4.2% today, and then you might get an ad where like we're paying 4.5%. Those rates will basically correct themselves as the federal government sets, or the Fed sets the rates each quarter. So pick a high yield savings account that you like for your personal stuff, but there's no need to move it around to chase a 0.5 percentage point. Those will kind of basically all stabilize within a few months anyway.
And in front here.
Hello. I have sort of always been in poverty, always been trying to chase like the next dollar to pay off the dollar that I owe to someone else. And so, while I have really good budgeting and really good, I have a spreadsheet for every single of my creative pursuits. The investment side and the like savings side are always very, very scary to me. Um, what kind of advice would you give to like start breaking bad habits? Um, you know, all of the like financial planning and all of that is just seems so far off in the future when I'm still trying to like claw my way out of bad situations. But I do want to start on like what are the simple things that I can start now that I will be happy in 5, 10 years when I actually like can apply the knowledge that I'm learning today.
Question. And I hate that my answer comes from an ex-boyfriend of mine. And I basically said the same thing. It's like, I cannot get ahead. I have all this debt. I'm not spending any money. Like, I am budgeting. Like, I'm not buying shoes or whatever. I just can't afford to live my life and I'm always too close to the line. And he said, you can afford $5 a week. I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I can afford $5 a week. With the way modern banking and savings works, you can set up these tiny transfers. So you asked about habits. The best advice I can give you is create that habit of every dollar that comes in, I am always saving. And today it might be one out of every $100, and that's all you can afford to be close to that line. And maybe it's $1 a week. I bet you could do $5. And then every quarter or even every year, put an escalator on that. So it's $5 this week. Next month it's $6. Then it's $7. And then in your 5 to 10 years, you've got thousands of dollars saved. So unfortunately, when you're that close to the line, I get it. It can feel overwhelming and you feel like you're never getting ahead, but that tiny little incremental savings sets up those habits. So for the rest of your life, every dollar that comes in, something will always be saved. Sometimes, like I said, I was saving 50% of my income at one point. I was making everyone around me crazy because I wouldn't go out to eat or do anything. And now I live a little bit different than that.
So I'd say too, like, focus on little wins. Like, I remember, and I'd be curious as to your opinion of this too, because I don't know what you would call it. But I mean, I remember years ago, get paid on Friday, Thursday, tank's about empty. Wouldn't have money to fill it up, so putting in a quarter tank of gas, right? Because that's all I could afford to do until I got paid. Now, I'm not in that situation anymore. I just go to the gas station, I fill up my tank, right? So I don't know when that changed, right? But like that really big difference, right? In terms of the stress and the way you think things when you go, like it might, that's one example, but like, maybe, I, turn down a offer to go out for dinner and hang out with some friends, right? Because don't want to spend the extra money waiting at home. Now if someone invites me out for dinner, it's not a financial decision, right? And so somewhere along the way, those little things change. It's not wealth. Like, you don't have to be rich to eat dinner or fill up your gas, right? But like, it's a stress reducer and it feels better. Is there a way that like maybe little things like that someone can look for or notice to really start to feel better about how they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that goes back to like the goal setting. Like, what are the financial and personal goals that you're trying to hit this year? So I want to have $200 saved. I want to pay off my debts, whatever that is. Record those wins. When we started our business, we had all these spreadsheets and QuickBooks and whatnot, and I had a tab in the spreadsheet called milestones. And anytime something good or cool happened, I would write it down. And now 8 years later, I go back and I see all these little milestones and I like laugh and I say, we signed our first client. Now we have 500 clients. So I love that idea of like picking these little things. For you, it was filling up the tank of gas. For me, it was, I live in New York City, traveling, going to the airport, taking a taxi to and from the airport. Back in the day was $60. Now it's $100. And that always felt like an insurmountable amount of money. And it was always like, I would always take the train and the bus and it would take me 2.5 hours to lug my suitcase. And it was such a like exhausting, stressful time suck. And then one day, $40, $60 was not my whole weekly budget for food. And that for me was the moment where I was like, I'm rich. Oh my God. I can take a taxi to JFK. And, since then I haven't thought about it. And that was a very cool moment.
I have a question related to that idea of like doing small, like if it's be $5 a week or what have you. Like, are there resources that you guys have that can be set up, like an app or things that you would recommend that are like, this one's actually really effective to do whatever small incremental savings you want to do? Can you share?
Yeah, there's a website called Acorns, or they will sort of like round up every expense and kind of like automatically pull money into your investment or savings account. I have a lot of clients use that, so that goes on my thumbs up list. Another one for investing, just to make it really easy, is a company called Betterment. It's very easy to set up SEP IRAs, Roth IRAs, regular investing accounts. So if you're at that stage where you're like, I am ready to invest and I want to do, $100 a month or $20 a week or whatever, you can just go in and set up that kind of automation. And look, there's no perfect way. Should I pay off my loan? Should I pay off my credit card debt? Should I build my emergency fund? Should I do my SEP IRA? Like, you could spend all day and there's no right answer. Just do something, right? Save that $5 somewhere, hopefully somewhere where you're not going to spend it in the next couple of years.
and both on the personal banking side and the business banking side as well, right? If you have a checking account and a savings account, you can set up automatic transfers, right? So you don't have to think about doing it every other week or every week, however much, whether it's $5 or $100. You can set that up so that it's building that emergency fund without you really having to think about it.
Yeah, I mean the technology is so good right now. It's most of it's free. So just setting up those accounts, it used to be you'd have to walk down. You said 100 checks a month, like you'd have to walk the bank and write a check or deposit the cash in the machine. You don't have to do that anymore. Now it's just a few clicks on your app.
More questions on work? Oh,
I'd love to hear from you, Ben, from the artist management perspective of what you saw in the years of working with artists. What was some good financial decisions that artists were making or you were helping artists kind of navigate?
The one thing that we always saw that was a big mistake that we kind of try to avert is like, okay, say an artist who's in very early stages, they get paid $100 for a show or just something, they're used to like not making that much money, and then for one random thing they get some museum is throwing a party and pays them $500 or some, there's this random bit, this random payment that's higher than they're normally used to. They would just like blow it all on some expensive in-ear monitors or something like that. And that was like something that we always had to kind of get in and be like, no, like let's wait till you're regularly getting that amount so I feel like that's like the main thing to avoid. I don't know what some, I don't know, honestly, like, yeah, we would always work to see like, okay, where was the money that we spent? How was that yielding the biggest return? Oftentimes it was merch. And we would kind of, but a lot of it was also like seeing where their fans were spending money. And kind of just like directing that money towards that, just to kind of try to like, yeah, again, maximize the returns on that. I don't know if I have like a great answer to that question. No, but yeah.
I mean, you bring up an interesting point, which, my whole business is built upon like, hey, you're smart. You made a bunch of money. You could probably do this on your own, but should you? Like, I can protect you from yourself. And I think a lot of what like business managers do is like, yeah, send me that money first. Obviously, you have to trust your business manager, but like, send it to me first. I'm going to give you some of it to go spend on something fun, but I'm going to hold it. I'm going to invest it. I'm going to make sure your taxes get paid before it gets blown. So I'm a big fan of putting between you and your money. I am a financial advisor. I have my own financial advisor. I know a lot about money. I could invest on my own, but I'm too busy to do that. So I'm a big fan of having professionals kind of be in the weeds with you, actually protect you from your when it comes to spending.
okay. All the way over there. And maybe you guys might have to shift the mic back and forth if that one's giving you grief.
Hello. Just a quick question regarding accounting, taxes, financial advisement. I've done everything myself. My numbers are very simple and low. I don't always know the mistakes I could be making. You mentioned you have your own financial advisor. For a new business owner or a young business owner, how to shop for, say, an accountant, how to shop for a financial advisor, who's helping me plan, who's helping me do my taxes, do I need them yet? General advice on navigating everyone who just wants to take more of everybody.
Yeah.
you.
The key word for financial advisor is fiduciary. Are they a fiduciary? And if they don't say it on their website or they don't say it in the first meeting, it's a no for me. How to find them? I think most people could benefit from, one or two meetings with a financial advisor. Not all financial advisors do that kind of project-based work, but they are out there. So I recommend always looking for, hourly based financial planner. Hourly based CFP is a great term. I'm trying to think. There's a network called the XYPN Planning Network. I'm a part of it, and the XY is for Gen X and Gen Y. So it's a lot of younger financial planners who run boutique firms who are getting started out. That's how we started. So in the beginning, they're looking for clients, so they're going to be a little bit cheaper and they're going to have lower minimums. So that might be a good place. I have clients come in and say, I think I'm doing everything right. I just want you to double check my homework and give me that sense of security so I can sleep better at night. And you might not get that answer, and that might be worth to you a few $1,000s just to know, like, yeah, I'm not missing anything. Accountants, harder to find. Ask your networks who loves their accountant, and then I forget who said it, but yeah, reach out to them. Now is actually a great time to reach out to accountants. They're getting ready for the holidays. We're doing our year-end tax planning. We're all very chill. But do not email us in February. We are in very bad moods.
More questions? Yes. Do my steps in it.
Any red flags, other like in terms of like financial advisor potentials, like anything to be like, whoa, like I don't I guess my fear around those things is always just getting into the bad relationship and not realizing it until it's too late.
Yeah, and it's a terrible industry, right? And we're very regulated, but also kind of not at all. And we were explaining kind of like what each relationship does. I mean, if you walk into a bank, you know what you're getting, right? You trust the brand. That's fine. For a financial advisor, again, fiduciary, very important. A red flag for me personally is insurance. If they are calling themselves a financial advisor, a financial planner, and their financial plan for you as a young person who doesn't necessarily have a lot of people depending on your income, if their financial plan is you need a life insurance policy, which is a quote unquote really good investment, that's a red flag to me. A life insurance policy, we call them whole life insurance policies, can be part of financial plans. They make sense for about 3% of the population. For everyone else, insurance is an important part of the plan. If you have young children, having what we call a term life insurance policy, if something terrible were to happen, your family would get a lump sum, but you're paying for that. There's no value there. So anyone leading with insurance as part of your financial plan that's a pretty big red flag for me.
More questions? I have one as well. If I am, let's say I have enough to like, I've done my business plan and I know what my milestones are and I want to meet with someone, but I think I can probably only like factor in meeting with them like once per year maybe to make sure I'm on the right path. How much does it cost? Like, what should I budget for if I'm going to take someone's time for an hour or 30 minutes? I don't know how long it would be. Like, what is a financial planning meeting look like?
Yeah. And it really varies. And you're going to get 100 different answers if you ask 100 different financial advisors. There's something called the Garrett Planning Network. And those are planners who work hourly. I think you're probably looking at $250 to $500 an hour. And typically there's going to be some prep involved in that. So I would say at the low end, probably $1,000 to $2,000 a year to get started. A lot of financial advisors, kind of once you cross the like, I'm ready to invest $500,000 or $1 million. Typically a lot of advisors will just charge 1% of whatever assets that they're managing. So if they're investing for you, you don't feel the fee because it's just coming out of your investment account. So if you're not quite at that level, that hourly or project relationship. For tax returns, again, I'm stuck on New York City prices, but I would say on the low end, you're probably looking for a business return, probably about $1,000. Tax returns for if you have something like an S corporation or a partnership, probably $2,000 or $3,000 is what you should maybe budget for. You should not be paying more than $5,000 for a business tax return, in my opinion, unless it's incredibly complicated and you've got lots of sub companies and whatnot. We have one client that is if we charge $15,000 for their return and it takes us about 200 hours to prepare.
Any other questions? No? Well, I'm going to hand this back to them. Oh, there's one behind me? Sorry. Hi. So I'm somebody who has always hated budgets. They terrify me, and I know exactly why that is. Have any advice on how to like reframe budgeting from like a personal perspective and then also from a business perspective?
So might be surprised to hear this, but I also personally hate budgeting. And so for years, I tried to do it, and I couldn't go to a grocery store and like try and hold myself to a specific number. Like I found it to be like a really big challenge. And so I would make these budgets, and I would never stick to them. They wouldn't work out. And somewhere along the way, I figured out something that worked for me, and I love it. It may not work for you, but I think it's a pretty good idea. So on the personal side, so what I started doing was, other than actual bills, right? So rent, mortgage, car, like those are real easy to do. But I started to lump food, base level entertainments, and just a lifeline, right? Hey, how much does it, if all my bills were paid and I had to live on cash from this paycheck to next paycheck, how much money, does it generally take me? And then I use the life budget. Now it's less concerned about like all these itemized little things, but the money is still there, and you can do the math and know how much you can save. So if the real itemized per item thing kind of annoys you, maybe try something like that where you open it up a little bit. It's a little easier to manage. And on the business side, I don't know that I would do it that way. On the business side, you probably want to have all the individual things itemized, and know what they are and when they're going to hit. There's certain software that can help with it. If you maybe do some entry level bookkeeping can kind of help keep some of that stuff. But I go back to clarity, right? You need to see what's there, and you need to know. And if what I recommended on the personal side, you try to do on the business side, I don't know that that would work out as well. I'd want to see all those items.
I totally agree. I hate budgets on the personal side. I think on the business side, they're absolutely essential. And if you go over budget, your business doesn't work. On the personal side, you have a little bit more wiggle room because you can always, move things around. I think it also comes back to the same advice I gave you, which was instead of trying to spend less, save more. So, hey, this month, and frame it in a positive way. So instead of saying like, I have to spend $100 less, like I'm going to save $200 this month, and I'm going to put it in my savings account or in my, investment account on the first of the month. And I'm going to look at my checking account and watch that number go down. When that number goes down, like that's it. I'm out of that's my budget. But instead of trying to save at the end of the month, you've already saved it. The finance community, we call it paying yourself first. That's one way to think about it too.
Anything else? Burning questions? Rich?
Are there any specific resources that you can recommend for people to quickly reference terms and kind of just like basic best practices for like personal we talked about NerdWallet a little bit, but what's like a good just like easy online reference to think about like, okay, oh right, SEP IRA, oh right, like here's how I need to, the 20% rule. Like what's an easy takeaway for that?
I'm going to plug my own Substack, which is called Money Changes Everything. And I've been doing it for about a year, and I cover a lot of the stuff we covered today. I define, I have a whole series on business ownership and do you need an LLC and what is a SEP IRA? For me personally, when I'm trying to define something for a client, I like Investopedia. It's sort of a Wikipedia that is actually vetted and run. Each article is written and peer reviewed by a financial advisor. So it's sort of like Wikipedia or ChatGPT, Reddit, but with a peer review. So for like basic terms. Also, I just thought of something for budgeting. How many of you are familiar with Elizabeth Warren, senator? Yeah. Before she was a senator, she was an economist. She was a professor. And she actually wrote a personal finance book. It was like in the early 2000s with her daughter called All Your Worth. Looks like a little outdated, but she has this concept in there of the 50-30-20 budget. Which is that you spend 50% of your income essentials like rent, car payments, insurance, etc. You save 20% of it. That's where that 20% savings comes from, and then 30% you just spend on the rest. So it's kind of like a really easy and saying like groceries, losing it. It's All You're Worth by Elizabeth Warren.
So in addition to music, my partner and I are also heavily involved in like grants, like applying and receiving grants as a artistic entity. And sometimes I feel like in the like budgetary system, it's like an outlier that inflates our income, and then sometimes our accountant's like, "Oh, you made a lot of money this year," but it's like money that's going towards like expenses. Any advice on how to maybe look at like a data analysis of your income with those included? Because I found that over the years it's been hard to estimate, especially given like sometimes you feel like you're winning the lottery, but it's all money going towards a particular project or expenses. Yeah.
I think you need a new accountant, because if you what you are describing is what we call, there's two types of accounting. There's cash accounting, which is like what came in this year, what went out, and then there's accrual accounting. So if you're not doing accrual accounting, you're gonna run into tax problems, right? We ran into this a lot with Kickstarter. A lot of folks who had never been business owners before would run these projects on Kickstarter. They'd raise a bunch of money in November, all that income would come in, and then they would actually produce the item or the thing the next year. So the taxes never matched up. So when you do accrual accounting, you tie everything back to the project. And you're doing that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just been harder to like speculate, I think, into the future.
Do you have QuickBooks?
I use Wave.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, because I haven't paid for QuickBooks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately, Intuit is a great company and they make very good software for accountants. So what you're describing can be done quite easily in QuickBooks, and your accountant can help you set it up. And it is really nice to be able to tie things to specific projects. And so you can, it's called class tracking. So you can kind of, plan for future things. You can copy a project and say, this is what happened last year. Here's what we think it's going to look like this year.
Cool. Thank you.
Walking it back towards the front. No? Okay, handing it off to Ben. Oh, you see? You see?
Got one more.
Hello. I really appreciate all the knowledge and the nuggets. Sometimes I'm a little bit of an instigator, and I think of like the avocado toast or whatever, like all the things that we have to do to make things work. And I know that's why we're here. But I'm also very curious, what system changes do you all think are needed in the financial world? Um, Especially in how is it going to be working for the people rather than corporations? I think as artists, I assume there's many artists here from various pathways, but a typical format is going to school. So from there is the student loans, and then the training to student to professional training isn't always there. So kind of all of these ways that we're getting screwed over. So I'm just really interested as a banker, as someone who has his own business. What do you think about the climate, and especially in this interesting economic and political state we're in?
So I am not authorized to speak on global financial issues on behalf of citizens, right? So I want to be careful here. So these are my opinions and not necessarily of Citizens Bank. But for me personally, I think one thing that really needs to change. Education feels too expensive for me. Like college it's so expensive that I know me personally, and I don't know what the fix is, right? So I can easily identify the problem. How you fix that problem, I have no clue. But I know, me personally, I really like to see us to somehow figure out a way to make education cheap.
We need to revise the tax system. We have a very barbell-like tax system. And unfortunately, all the tax policy reforms that I've seen don't actually help. We have an extremely low tax on corporations. with the intent, the economic policy intent is that if we keep taxes low, more business will come here. We'll be able to produce more, we'll create more jobs. Unfortunately, we haven't really seen that play out in the way that it was intended. So, I think it's when you're in the economic system that isn't working for you, it starts to feel like it's the worst one ever. If I may offer a little bit of hope, we're actually in a pretty good one in terms of historical periods, in terms of unemployment. I know we have pretty high inflation levels right now, so things feel a lot more expensive. But really, there has never been a moment where there is easier access to funds, easier access to loans, easier access to government programs, easier access to investing. It used to be that in order to invest, you had to, have $100,000 to go to a stockbroker and you have to call them on the phone, and you probably had to be a white man, right? That was women only got access to credit cards about 30 years ago, so that's fun. Not 30 years ago, excuse me. 50 years ago. I can't do math, even though I work in finance. So we need tax policy reform because there's just too much money that's staying at the top and isn't trickling down. And unfortunately, the problem with economic policy is that you can have intentions and you can study history and you can make predictions, but it doesn't always go the way you want it to. I don't want to place too much blame on anyone. This is just the latest experiment we're in. What happens if we reduce taxes at the top? Will it trickle down to the bottom? And honestly, I don't think we're at the end of the experiment. It doesn't feel to me like it's working right now, but it might turn around in the next couple of years. So I know it feels bleak, but hold on to the hope that actually you do have a lot of opportunity right now.
Once again, moving towards the front. Okay. Handing it back to them.
All right, cool. Well, thank you both. Thank you all for coming. And next week is the week on touring. So everyone come back for that one as well. So see you then.